Hello everybody, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today we're going to be doing a little bit of gaming news. We don't do this a lot on the channel, but every once in a while when there's a new game that's announced or, kind of big gaming news in the Wargame space, I do like to delve into this a little bit. And the reason that we're doing this today is because on Sunday, there was a new game that was announced called Master of Command Prussian Glory. Now, the footage that you're seeing on the screen in front of you is from the announcement trailer, and we'll also be interspersing some screenshots from the Steam page for this game, as well as some video from, they did a dev diary as well in association with the trailer being announced. Master of Command is being made by Armchair History Interactive, which is the gaming arm of the Armchair Historian, a 2 million plus subscriber YouTube channel that does a lot of animated histories, which with a similar art style to what you see here. They have made one other game previously called Fire and Maneuver, so this will be their second. And this is a game that looks at the 7 Years' War with a strong focus on the campaigns of Frederick the Great. And frankly, it just looks kind of interesting. We don't get a lot of games about the 7 Years' War. I think the only game I've played remotely recently in this time period was by Oliver Keppelmuller, who was the developer behind the Grand Tactician game, which looks at the American Civil War, but originally he did a 7 Years' War game. And so that's the only one, and I really only played that for like 30 minutes. I think that's the only game I played in like the last 15 years about the 7 Years' War, at least on computer. There were some, I don't know if it was like a predecessor to Age of Rifles. I feel like there was like an Age of Muskets or something like that type game, which I played about the 7 Years' War a long time ago. I was in high school, so 15 years ago. But I can't think of another game that I've played that touches on this topic, which is really kind of interesting when you think about it, because Frederick the Great is like one of the pantheons in sort of military history that people really like to talk about his campaigns a lot. And you hear about him a lot, and yet there are very few PC games about him. I think, later Napoleon kind of overshadows him a bit. But nonetheless, certainly one of those key figures in military history, and folks don't talk about those campaigns a whole lot. And they don't really talk about the 7 Years' War a whole lot, at least here in the States, which is pretty interesting considering the importance that conflict has globally. Now, I suppose the majority of the conflict that we talk about here in the States is the stuff that was occurring in Canada, which is a very small part of that war. This game will take place in Europe, around Prussia, and it will have 3 playable factions. You can play as the Prussians, you can play as the Russians, or you can play as the Austrians. Now, the French were obviously involved in the war as well, so were the British, but at least in terms of this game, it'll be, from a playable faction perspective, it'll be Austria, Russia, or Prussia. Now, they're making some interesting design choices in this game that when I saw that kind of made my ears perk up a bit, because it's not just your traditional war game where you say, we're going to play this war, we're going to create scenarios that deal with this particular battle, and then we're just going to see and let you play through the specific tactical battle in history and see how things play out, differently or otherwise. If you think at a lot of war games, if you think of Sid Meier's Gettysburg or Ultimate General Gettysburg, you had these predefined battles. You had, or Sid Meier's Antietam or Civil War Generals 2, right? Like you had all these predefined battles. The order of battle of the enemy was static. It didn't change. Your own force was largely static. And what changed was how you approach the individual scenario. And maybe there would be some slight changes in the following scenarios based on the casualties that you took. But for the most part, you were playing either a historically scripted scenario, or you would be playing a variant that could have occurred based on, what had occurred in prior battles. And that was kind of the way I think folks say, hey, you want to refight this battle, you just want to see if you can do better. Like, that is a very fixed approach to how a lot of war games work. Frankly, that's how Scourge of War works, right? Scourge of War Waterloo, you're playing the Battle of Waterloo. Scourge of War Gettysburg, you're playing a series of scenarios in the Battle of Gettysburg. So the idea was the battle doesn't change, it's just your approach to the battle. And then sometimes there's minor little things that change, but not much else changes. This game's taking a very different approach to that. With Master of Command, they are specifically saying that you are going to be playing a roguelike. So it's not a historical reenactment. It is the 7 Years' War. It has the participants from those battles. But the way that this will work is every time you start a new campaign, the game will decide, are you going to fight in a different sort of region, if you will, of Europe? So are you going to fight in Pomerania, north of Prussia? Are you going to fight in Silesia, south of Prussia? Are you going to fight... I mean, I don't know what all the different regions are you can fight in. Those were the two referenced in the dev diary, but maybe you could fight in, east of Prussia or something like that. Those would be the three regions I'd assume you'd be involved in, since Russia, Austria, and Prussia are the three playable factions. Some of the imagery did include like a French arrow, so maybe you'd play west of Prussia. But so essentially the game decides when you start a new campaign, where are you going to play? What section of Europe are you going to play in? At that point, then you are going to have to fight in different provinces. So each region will be made of provinces, or each, section will be made up of subsections. And then you'll have to fight in each one of those to try and take those areas over. Now, when a game starts, you choose your country, the region gets assigned, you select your army, so you select the army that you want to fight with. I assume there's some sort of army management or composition management of the force that you're going to bring with you. You only command one army, so you're not managing the whole civilian population, presumably. You are picking an army, picking some sort of composition for that fight. It brings it into the game, and then you've got these different, provinces, if you will, in each of these campaigns that you're going to fight in that you have to take over. And the way that you take over a province is you select the province you want to fight in. There's a operational map, I'll call it, that is randomly generated, so it is not a fixed map, but rather it is something that'll be created each time that you play. And that map will, basically have your army start on the far left side of the screen. The enemy's army headquarters or camp is on the far right side of the screen. And you have to make your way from the left side of the map to the right side of the map where you'll fight a battle. Now, you have multiple different routes or options you can take to get from point A to point B. Depending on the route you take, if it's more direct, you may reach the enemy quicker. If it's less direct, you may reach them less quickly. You can take perhaps more covert routes through the mountains. And depending on the route you take, that will influence how quickly the enemy gets reinforcements at their camp, how large the enemy army is when you meet them at their camp, how large your army is when you meet them when you meet the enemy at the camp. Along the way, you get different events that can pop up. Maybe you are foraging a nearby village. Maybe you're getting some recruits. Maybe there's a small skirmish when you go into the battlefield map so that you actually have to fight an enemy force, and maybe your troops can gain some experience. But when you get to the end of the map, then you fight a big battle. You fight sort of a large, decisive type engagement to determine the fate of that province. And you can't really lose, is my understanding. Like, if you lose, another feature of roguelites tends to be permadeath. So I'm assuming if you get defeated, your campaign might end. Because Frederick the Great, which is sort of the driving force behind this game, you can't lose. He couldn't lose. He was so heavily outnumbered in the 7 Years' War that he could not afford a decisive defeat. And so that's sort of a big concept behind this. Now, I'm curious how that looks, right? Like, this does mean it's not going to be a recreation of, the Battle of Koln or the Battle of Rossbach. And I don't really know the 7 Years' War that well to be able to say I want to play any particular battle there because I don't know it that well. But in that sense, if there's this dynamic element of what you face is based on how you move across the map, how you manage your military, it's not a historical recreation of a particular fight, but that's not as uncommon as maybe you would think in war games. Frankly, that's how Ultimate General Civil War works. I know it says, right, like, I'm going to fight the Battle of Gettysburg or Antietam, but the way the campaign works in that game is you completely manage your own corps, and then eventually you manage your whole army, so that by the time you get to any of the late battles in the campaign, the force you bring to bear has absolutely nothing to do with the historical forces that fought at that battle. And the same for the AI forces, which are influenced by, the campaign ahead of time. So, it's kind of a variant of that. Obviously, I don't think you're going to be fighting on historical maps. We don't know yet. They haven't announced that yet, but I'm assuming if they're really leaning into this dynamic map generation, then you probably won't, but it's still interesting. I think that could be a very different take on this kind of historically themed game, so I'm definitely interested to see what comes of that. Additionally, I'm curious about how the campaign progresses, because basically the way this works is you pick a province to fight in, you move from left to right across the map, you fight the battle, you win the battle, and then you have to do it again. You have to take all the different provinces effectively that you're fighting in that region. So if you're fighting in Pomerania, you take all the provinces there. You're fighting in Silesia, you take all the provinces there. And then once you take all the provinces in your given region, then there's sort of a boss battle or final assault on your position, which will be, I'm assuming, just a much larger, more difficult AI for you to manage, to fight against. So again, that's kind of an interesting idea, right? I know I've seen anyway on Steam that some of the critiques of Fire and Maneuver, the prior game, was that the game snowballed a bit and the AI could get a little bit easy. I know they've said in the dev diary, typically in a lot of these kind of war games snowball and the AI gets weaker as you get stronger. That is certainly the case in games like Total War, where the AI is harder at the beginning and then by the end you're so strong no one can resist you. So it's interesting to kind of have a boss type mentality to the game. They didn't say boss battle, but that's just sort of where my head went looking at it. So it's definitely intriguing. I'm curious how it'll play out, but very interesting. There also appears to be quite a bit of effort focused on army management. So this is a game where you can, chart the course of your individual battalions or regiments. You can customize what their uniforms look like, what their cartridge boxes look like. You can see units get upgraded or get more experience throughout the campaign. You could take a line regiment and maybe with experience, they could become basically like your guards, almost like an old guard type situation, or grenadiers. And so I think I always love when games do that. That was one of my favorite things about Ultimate General Civil War, was that army management aspect of I can grow attached to these characters, to these pixels, and really, have an affinity for this regiment. And if I've got to plug a gap, oh man, it would suck to plug it with a unit that I love and see them get shredded. Like, that is an element of these types of games which I really do like. And so I think it's pretty cool that they're showing such a high degree of customization and sort of storytelling that they're building in with these individual units. Likewise, individual officers are represented in the game and can become casualties. They call that out too, that this is an era where officer casualties are very high. And so that's something that, obviously if you lose one of your better officers, it's a permadeath situation. You're not going to get them back for the next fight. So, that will shade how you actually deploy your forces and how you fight these battles and how much, how risky do you want to be with them, right? Is it better to play it safe at times? I don't know the answer to that, but I think it does pose some interesting questions with this game. And then also, I've been talking for 15 minutes almost, And I haven't even mentioned the battles yet. So the battle system is going to be real time. So you move units across the map in real time. They're going to manage troop morale, ammunition, combat effectiveness. There's definitely pretty clearly defined terrain on the map that you can see there in the trailer. So we'll see how that plays. Their prior game was turn-based, so this will be real time. So that'll be a difference for them. I'm curious to see how it looks. I love the art style. I was trading a few emails with Griffin Johnson, who's he runs the Armchair Historian, and he is the Armchair Historian. And I said, hey, this looks a lot like the American Heritage Civil War picture book, which for those of you who aren't aware, it has these beautiful sort of top-down drawings of the different battlefields in the American Civil War. And fun bit of gaming history, that book was a book that Sid Meier's saw, and as a coffee table book, and really kind of inspired a lot of what he would use in Sid Meier's Gettysburg. So I love the look of that top-down imagery. Obviously, we'll have to wait to make comparisons to an epic like Sid Meier's Gettysburg, but certainly a game that I'll be having my eyes on. And I don't think we're talking about a 2024 release. I don't have any inside information about when the game might come out, but just based on the timing, based on the fact that they've said they're in early stages and most of the art is concept art, I'm assuming we're looking at a 2025 release. But this will definitely be on my radar. It'll be, in my wish list. I'll keep an eye on how this develops, and maybe we'll make another video closer to release, or if not then I'm sure we'll at least give the game a look when it does come out, when it's ready. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. What do you guys think about this game? I think the roguelite approach is interesting. It's not the only war game that's done it. I think it was Armored Commander 2 had a roguelite tank game where you were in charge of a World War II tank, and that was a pretty well-received game, at least in terms of the Steam reviews. I just haven't seen a roguelike game at the tactical real-time combat variety. So I'm very curious to see how this plays out. But that's really, that's basically all the information we have at this point. The fact that I've dragged this out to almost 18 minutes of me rambling is, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I definitely want to hear your thoughts. Please share what you're thinking. There's a link in the description to the Steam page if you want to find out more over there, or if you want to wish list it. I've always got my eyes out for new war games that are trying to do things differently, and we don't get enough of those. We barely ever get anything in the musketry age. I mean, we barely get anything to begin with. And then we definitely almost get nothing outside of the American Civil War and to a lesser extent Napoleonics. So I'm just happy that someone's trying to take a different sort of era into this game, into this, type of combat. And, we'll see what comes of it. I don't know if there will be other game modes. It does say it's single player only, so there won't be, at least as of now, there's no multiplayer that they're planning with this. But, I'm very intrigued. And that's all I have to say for you guys. Please leave your thoughts down below. And I'll take a look at what you guys have to say, interact with you guys in chat, and without further ado, I think that's going to do it for today's video. So, once again, this game that has been announced is called Master of Command, Prussian Glory. It's being developed by Armchair History Interactive, the gaming division of the Armchair Historian, and we'll have our eyes on it. Until next time, though, guys, this is the Historical Gamer saying thank you for watching, and I'm out.